Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Delegate Jazz Lewis. We're here for the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee of Appropriations. We have 4 agencies before us today. We are going to start with the Office of the Attorney General. So, Mr. Polikoff, first, congratulations to your Eagles, though it pains me to say that, but congratulations to you. You can start with the analysis, and then we will turn over to the Attorney General for his testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be remiss for both the record and the love of my father if I didn't note that I'm a Giants fan by family, but go Birds when I have to. Again, Jacob Polikoff for the Department of Legislative Services to present the budget analysis for the Office of the Attorney General. The Attorney General acts as legal counsel to the Governor, the General Assembly, and the Judiciary, along with all departments, boards, and commissions, except for a few. The Office of the Attorney General represents the state in all matters of interest to the state, including civil litigation and criminal appeals in all state and federal courts. They also review legislation passed by the General Assembly prior to consideration by the Governor and oversee the expenditures of the Mortgage Loan Servicing Practices Settlement Fund. The office currently has 14 divisions, which we will be talking about today. The fiscal 2026 budget increases, as we see on page 1, by $9.8 million, or 12.3%, to $90.1 million in total. And on page 2, we have some information about proposed deficiencies for fiscal 2025. There are 3 proposed fiscal 2025 deficiencies for OAG. They have a net impact of increasing the overall appropriation by $1,500. The first proposed deficiency includes $1,500 in general funds to fully fund the mandated salary for the Attorney General. And the second and third deficiency appropriations are related in the Legal Counsel and Advice and Criminal Investigations divisions. These each reduce the general fund appropriation by $845,000 and increase the special fund appropriation by the same amount, and that comes out to a total of $1,690,000 reduction in general funds and a mirror increase in special funds. And that's contingent on the enactment of legislation expanding the allowable uses of the Securities Act Registration Fund, which we'll talk about more in just a couple of moments in the BRFA section of the analysis. As we see in Exhibit 1 on page 3, as I noted, the allowance for fiscal 2026 totals $90.1 million after accounting for contingent reductions. Legal Counsel and Advice is the largest program, comprises 37% of the allowance, and the Consumer Protection Division is the second largest program at 18% of the allowance. No other program accounts for more than 10% of the total allowance. In Exhibit 2 on page 4, we see again that the fiscal 26 allowance increases by 12.3% as compared to the fiscal 25 working appropriation after accounting for proposed deficiency appropriations and the contingent reductions. The largest change is the creation of 31 new positions, 20 of which are contractual conversions. We also have increases for salary increases and associated fringe benefits, including the fiscal 2025 COLA and increments, and an increase in the allocation for shared state services. On page 5, we have a discussion of the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. There are three provisions, in the BRFA this year as introduced, which impact OAG. The first alters the mandate that requires $350,000 in general funds to be included for the enforcement of consumer protection laws by requiring the mandate to be met with special funds rather than general funds. The allowance therefore contains a contingent reduction of $350,000 and special funds in the same amount contingent on passage of the BRFA. However, the language in the fiscal 2026 budget bill containing these contingent actions is not clear, as it is written as contingent on the enactment of legislation reducing the general fund mandate, while the mandate is instead altered to mandate special funds rather than general funds. And DLS is recommending amending the budget bill language to make the contingent language align more clearly with the BRFA provision. The other 2 provisions impact the Securities Act Registration Fund, one of which alters the allowable uses of the fund to allow funds to be used for the agency's general operations. The Securities Act Registration Fund is normally used to support the operations of the Securities Division, including investigations and enforcement actions. The provision is related to the contingent reductions I previously mentioned in both fiscal 2025 and in fiscal 2026, each totaling $1,690,000, replacing general funds with those special funds in legal counsel and advice and in civil litigation. Although the amounts vary between the years between the two divisions. The other provision authorizes the governor to transfer $5 million from the Securities Act Registration Fund to the general fund, as long as it's done before June 30th of this year. Accounting for both provisions, OAG anticipates a fiscal 2026 closing fund balance of $5.7 million for the Securities Act Registration Fund. On the bottom of page 5, we have information on personnel for the Office of the Attorney General. As I mentioned, there are 31 new positions, new regular positions in the fiscal 26 allowance, and a decrease of 22 contractual FTEs, mostly due to the contractual conversions. The brand new positions include 5 new Assistant Attorneys General and an administrative position for civil litigation, and a claims processor, and 2 positions supporting the opioids unit, along with 2 enforcement positions for the Consumer Protection Division. The additional AAG positions are to add resources for trying and investigating cases, as the number has increased in recent years, along with the more complex nature of cases as digital evidence becomes more prevalent and takes additional time for analysis during investigation and prosecution. Among the contractual conversions, there are 5 AAGs and 4 administrative positions in the criminal division and 11 administrative positions in the Consumer Protection Division. Those administrative positions, for CPD include a chief arbitrator, investigator, case coordinator, and additional staff for the mediation, health advocacy, and health club units. In the criminal division, the non-AAG new staff include a victim witness coordinator, an analyst, and 2 investigators. And then in addition to the contractual conversions, OPD also has 2 fewer contractual FTEs in the allowance for CPD, as the agency is no longer utilizing contractual staff in the financial unit. A couple things worth noting here. The first is that the fiscal 25 legislative appropriation included 372.5 regular positions. 4 of those positions were transferred to the Office of the Correctional Ombudsman from the Juvenile Justice Monitoring Unit through a budget amendment as required by some legislation passed last session. And in addition, the Board of Public Works created 1 new AAG to support the Maryland Technology Development Corporation's General Counsel and 3 other AAGs providing services to the same. As a result of those mid-year actions, the working appropriation for fiscal 25 has a total of 369.5 regular positions. At the end of December 2024, the Office of the Attorney General had 13 vacant positions. That is below the number of necessary vacancies for their budgeted turnover amount. And it's worth noting that if the agency continues to have this level of vacant positions, additional funding may be required to fully fund personnel expenses. On page 7, we have a discussion of the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Recoveries have increased as litigation concluded this past year. This unit is federally required, and it investigates and prosecutes fraud involving the Medicaid system by providers and Medicaid administrators. The unit also investigates and prosecutes crimes involving the abuse and neglect of vulnerable adults as it relates to healthcare, along with crimes involving the ongoing opioid use epidemic. The unit is funded mostly with federal funds and prosecutes both civil and criminal cases. As we see in Exhibit 3 on page 7, the total number of cases and completed investigations decreased in fiscal 2024. Recoveries, however, total $10.5 million, and that's an increase of $8.4 million from the prior year. These recoveries include fines, settlements, and overpayments. The significant increase in funds recovered in fiscal 2024 stems from 2 long-running criminal fraud investigations. These cases concluded in fiscal 2024 and brought approximately $9.5 million in restitution. Without the recoveries from those 2 cases, the recoveries would have been approximately $1 million, and that would have been the lowest amount collected in the past 10 years. On page 8, we also discuss the rollout of the Access to Counsel and Evictions program entering its final year. The program was established by Chapter 746 of 2021, along with the ACE Special Fund. The program and the Special Fund are both administered by the Maryland Legal Services Corporation. They provide counsel in cases of eviction for qualifying individuals. That legislation also established the ACE Task Force, which has 15 members appointed by the Office of the Attorney General, and the task force is responsible for studying potential funding sources and making recommendations to improve the implementation of the program, along with evaluating the provision of services provided. The rollout is a 3-year process, and it's scheduled to be completed October 1st of this year. The first phase included counsel being offered via the program to qualifying tenants in counties that have previously operated their own access to counsel and evictions programs. The current phase of the rollout involves geographic expansion to all counties, including those that did not previously have a program, as well as the implementation of a coordinated intake program, which allows tenants to call a hotline to request counsel in an eviction proceeding, and then they're referred directly to a provider serving their area who has the capacity to take on the case. In fiscal 2024, 8,745 tenants were provided with counsel by the program. That's more than double the number from the prior year. Fiscal 2024 also included the program expanding its representation to each jurisdiction in the state and adding additional legal services providers. As we see in Exhibit 4 on page 9, Anne Arundel, Baltimore, and Prince George's counties and Baltimore City accounted for approximately 80% of the total number of cases in fiscal 2024. Funding for the program in fiscal 2024 was provided by the Abandoned Property Fund and federal grant funds from the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which were required via an agreement with the Department of Housing and Community Development. The distribution from the Abandoned Property Fund was mandated by Chapter 40 of 2022, and that mandate is currently set to expire after fiscal 2027. The funding for the ACE program is primarily for legal services grants to the legal services providers. However, funds are also used for administrative costs and tenant outreach and education. Now, as we see in Exhibit 5 on page 10, the costs of the program exceeded $14 million in fiscal 2024, including funding from both the Abandoned Property Fund and the federal grant funds. MLSC has previously estimated that the program will cost $25 million per year when it's fully rolled out. Being that the rollout process is planned to complete during fiscal 2026, the program does not appear to be fully funded and may require additional funds to operate at full capacity during fiscal 2026. Before October 1st of 2025, MLSC should work with the task force to continue to research and identify additional fund sources for the program. Now, given these circumstances, MLSC should comment on how the organization intends to close the gap in funding, and DLS additionally recommends the adoption of committee narrative, requesting a report on the final implementation of the program, along with the estimated costs of the program in fiscal 2027 and information on all funding available for the program. On page 11, we have a brief discussion of the Child Victims Act litigation, which poses potentially significant fiscal liability for the state. Chapter 5 of 2023 was the Child Victims Act, which repealed the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse lawsuits. As of the time this analysis was written, there were about 3,500 lawsuits lodged against state agencies alleging sexual abuse. The act sets the state's maximum liability at $890,000 for a single claimant for injuries arising from an incident or occurrence, and occurrence is not defined in statute. Negotiations are ongoing between OAG, outside counsel hired by the state, and representatives of parties which have filed suit against the state. There is no funding currently designated in the fiscal 2025 working appropriation or the fiscal 2026 allowance for payments to claimants. To the extent that a settlement agreement is reached before the close of the legislative session, the governor and General Assembly may need to identify a funding source and add funds to the budget for the settlement. The Office of the Attorney General should comment on the expected timeline for the completion of negotiations, as well as what options exist for addressing the potential financial cost for the state. On page 12, we have the operating budget recommended actions. We have the previously mentioned report on the access to counsel on evictions, final implementation, and future cost report. The second and third recommended actions are for adjusting the language in the budget bill regarding the contingent reductions, which relate to the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. With that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for you today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Polikoff. Colleagues, do we have any questions for DLS? Seeing none, Mr. Attorney General and team, you all can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and the members of the committee for your diligence in working through a very difficult budget, in a very difficult budget environment. I'd like to also thank Jacob Polikov, our analyst. We've got an extraordinary relationship with him, and so I appreciate everything that you do. And it's an honor to be able to appear before you to discuss the fiscal year 2026 operating budget for the Office of the Attorney General. As the Chief Legal Officer for the state, I am on the front lines of protecting Marylanders in many different ways and in many different areas. And I do it in partnership with many different agencies and departments at both the state and the local level. However, the OAG faces significant challenges, fiscal challenges, that threaten our ability to meet these critical responsibilities. And the OAG, the Office of the Attorney General, requires adequate resources to continue serving Marylanders effectively, and I urgently seek your support to address these funding gaps. Let me highlight just some of the challenges. I should say that the committee should have received our written testimony in response to Mr. Polikov's analysis and address the questions that he raised. So I just want to highlight a few things. Challenge number one, funding reductions. Last year, we took a $2.8 million reduction in the current fiscal year. And this year, we're facing a $1.7 million reduction in general funds. And it does impair our ability to fully support our mission and the complex legal and operational needs of the organization. It reduces the flexibility that we have to address items such as investments in technology and other upgrades to the organization. Challenge number two, our reliance on special funds, and those are diminishing funds. We rely on special funds from the Securities Registration Fund. You've heard from Mr. Polikov that the governor proposes withdrawing $5 million from the Securities Registration Fund. We also rely on the Consumer Protection Fund, and that is not a reliable or predictable funding source. These funds are projected to decline significantly in the coming years, jeopardizing essential legal functions, including consumer protection, securities regulation, and opioid enforcement, as well as support to the courts and General Assembly. Our advice and counsel of the General Assembly is funded through special funds in the OAG, and that's true for the support that we provide to the courts. That's in the proposed budget this year. Number three, the impact of federal funding uncertainty. And I know we're all uncertain about that, and you know that the Office of the Attorney General is on the front line in terms of ensuring that whatever actions are taken by the federal government, they're lawful. But we are anticipating, as we all are, reductions in federal funding. This could hit heavily on our Medicaid Fraud and Vulnerable Victims Unit, which faces severe cuts without federal support. And today that program is funded 75% federal, 25% state. Other programs that could face reduced federal funding, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, and the Commission on Hate Crimes Response and Prevention. So there are some critical needs and requests for support I'd like to highlight. First, we do ask that you support the Budget Reconciliation and Finance Act actions, and Mr. Polikov addressed those. And that one of them is to allow the OAG to use the Securities Fund to support vital legal operations, to give us more flexibility. For example, the Federal Accountability Unit that we've heard about. This is our team that is holding the federal government accountable. I'm grateful for the 6 pins that I've received, but I would like to make it clear that the funds for those were not new funds. Those are funds within the Securities Registration Fund. So I would ask for the BRFA provision to allow us to continue to use the Securities Registration Fund in a flexible manner. I also urge, and this is more for your colleagues over at HGO, where I'm going to right after this meeting, but when you're voting on it on the floor, and hopefully it makes it to the floor, expand the allowable uses for the Opioid Restitution Fund. Right now, we have an opioid enforcement unit of 6 people. Those are the 6 people that have brought in the $680 million in opioid restitution recovery. Now, almost $200 million has already arrived to Maryland, and of that, about $80 million available to the state for discretionary use. That is done by the Opioid Enforcement Unit, and today the Opioid Enforcement Unit is funded from the Consumer Recovery Fund. However, that unit doesn't do anything to put money into the Consumer Recovery Fund. They put money into the Opioid Restitution Fund. And I don't think you can find another inspection program in the state, compliance program in the state, or enforcement program in the state that recovers money for the state and does not rely on those monies to support that enforcement, inspection, and compliance action. So we've got some bills. We testified yesterday in the Senate. Will be today over in the House, and we're asking for that. No impact on the general fund. It's one special fund to another. Second, support for funding to address projected deficits. And as it was pointed out, the OIG is projected to face a $2 million deficit due to higher than expected personnel expenses, staffing needs, and as I mentioned, the investment in technology. 2 years ago, I shared with you that we had a 23% vacancy rate. DBM gave us very clear instructions. We had over the target requests. They said, reclassify your current positions to what you need. We reclassified a number of attorney positions to non-attorney positions to right-size the organization. As I sit here before you today, we are under 3% vacancy in the Office of the Attorney General. We heard the mandate loud and clear. Reclassify and fill vacancies to put people to work for the state, put people to work for the people of Maryland. So we fulfilled this, and as a result, we do have higher than expected personnel expenses because we have a lower vacancy rate. So I request your support in ensuring that these funding gaps are addressed through restoration of previous cuts once the state's fiscal situation improves. Third, increases in revenue for special funds. I propose an increase in the securities stockbroker fee. We're working with DBM on that. Our proposal would generate approximately $2.5 million for the securities fund. We did a survey of surrounding states. Maryland's security registration fee for brokers is lower than West Virginia's and Pennsylvania's. It's slightly higher than the District of Columbia and Virginia. We think that this is certainly an industry whose industry participants could afford a modest, I don't know, proposing $10 or $15 increase on their fee. So we would ask for your support, and we're working with DBM in terms of the percent, and with the legislature, obviously. We'll work with you on, of the increase, what would go to the general fund and what would go to the securities registration fund. But we'd like your support there. And then finally, appropriate funding for the opioids enforcement unit. I actually already addressed that. So in conclusion, thank you very much for your support, the support over the last 2 years that we've received. And I look forward to working with you and the committee members to work through this very challenging budget scenario that we face. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Colleagues, do we have any questions for the Attorney General? Seeing none, we appreciate you. We do have one virtual witness. I believe we have Ms. Michelle Siri of MLSC, who's tuning in virtually. Okay. We'll give her a second to come on screen. Hi there. Hey, Michelle, can you hear us?
Mr. Chair. Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and members of the subcommittee, and Michelle Siri, representing the Maryland Legal Service. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Hello, good
You're good to
afternoon.
go.
It's nice to see you all. Thank you for your flexibility with virtual. Yeah.
You can keep going. We can hear you.
Okay. I am really here mostly to answer any questions that you all might have about the ACE program, and to also say that it is working. We are really grateful for the funding from the state and through the Attorney General's office and the partnerships that we have. We have done, and when I say we, it's the grantees, have done an amazing amount of work. As Jacob said, we've doubled the number of people who have received services, and we are continuing to expand. We are through the whole state right now. We have a coordinated intake program across the state right now, and it's working. It really is what I'm here to say, that it is working, and that we appreciate the funding, and that we are here to continue doing it for as long as the state sees fit, and really just here to answer any other questions.
Colleagues, do you all have any questions for Ms. Siri? Seeing none, I only have one question. This is actually for Mr. Attorney General. Just want to know if you had anything else to say on the Child Victims Act, and I know our exposure is more of a DBM issue as far as litigation, but if there's anything else you could share on your thoughts related to that legislation. Obviously, the Supreme Court said that it was constitutional, and you all are moving forward.
So as you indicated, the Supreme Court of Maryland did rule that the Child Victims Act is constitutional. As you probably have read in the news as well, there are between 3,500 and 4,000 claimants who are seeking to file action or have already against the state. They are represented by counsel. We are engaged in very active discussions. I think it's in everyone's interest, both the states and the individual complainants and plaintiffs, to settle this matter. It's difficult for me to give you a timeline on that. I can tell you that both sides have a sense of urgency and like to bring this to a conclusion sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Delegate Stanko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I know it's not your domain anymore in this. Is your intent, if possible, is the intent, if possible, to complete it before the end of session, or do you anticipate it's going to go longer? And I ask that because I think what many folks in the General Assembly are trying to figure out is what our action case is going to be, and I think it will be helpful to understand the urgency in which what we need to move, if that makes sense.
Right, and I think it would be irresponsible for me to say that whether it would be before the sine die or not. We are very mindful of the legislative calendar, the budget's constraints, that any settlement amount would be a considerable amount for the state, and all parties have an interest in wrapping this up sooner rather than later. So we're mindful of all that. We're pressing ahead, but I wouldn't want to raise any expectations about a time certain.
Thank you.
Delegate McComas.
Just briefly, Attorney General Brown, can you kind of talk about the lawsuits against the Trump administration and whether we've got the cards or Trump's got the Trump cards? Just and if it's not proper to speculate or say anything, I understand as well, because you're in the throes of a battle.
So the state has joined and filed in a number of lawsuits. The first one had to do with birthright citizenship. The second one had to do, and the one that I think has the broadest impact on the work of state government, was the Trump administration's freezing of federal funds, and that was exceedingly disruptive and chaotic, and shockwaves of fear rippled throughout not only state government, but among communities around the state, wondering whether veterans benefits were at stake, SNAP benefits were at stake. And there's been a lot of conflicting information coming out of the administration, what they believe the executive order applied to, how it interacted with DBM's, DBM, I say DBM, that's ours, OMB's directives on this. So we are experiencing some successes to date, right? We had a temporary restraining order and a successful motion to enforce that order, so that the federal funding freeze was stayed. Now, we still hear anecdotally that some agencies in state government, not only in Maryland, but around the country, are experiencing freezes or delays, but we are still actively engaged in that litigation. The third sort of major litigation that we're involved in is to address the involvement, if you will, of the Department of Government Efficiency and Mr. Elon Musk. We contend that they are not vetted. They should not be authorized to access the central payment system of the United States, which moves anywhere between $6 to $9 trillion a year through that system. 11 billion comes to the state of Maryland, 50+ billion come to the people of Maryland, and you can only imagine the massive amounts of personal information in that system. So we were successful in that case as well to date to get a temporary restraining order to prevent that from happening. And there are a number of other cases and actions that we're looking at. I think perhaps relevant, most relevant perhaps for what we're talking about today in terms of the budget. Again, the governor put in his budget, and I'm asking the General Assembly to keep it in the budget, 6 pins for a unit that is fighting this fight. And I made very clear in a press conference I had on Monday, in conversations I've had with people, if I can't stand in front of a town hall of 200 people that represent all of the interests of Maryland, from rural Maryland to our urban centers in Maryland, and be able to draw a line between the actions I take and what it means for them and their family, then I won't be in that action. And I said on Monday that this is not about President Trump. This is about the actions of the Trump administration that threaten the well-being of the state of Maryland and Marylanders.
First, I just want to say thank you very much for your leadership on this. A lot of the federal civil service are Maryland residents, and we feel for them in this moment. And we know that with your powers as a constitutional officer, right, we've empowered the Attorney General in years past to be able to pursue things on behalf of the people of Maryland. You are working in coordination with the governor, but you don't have to anymore. But we know you guys are, and we appreciate you fighting on behalf of all Marylanders. One more bite at the apple, Delegate Stanko.
And this is a general question, and this is hypothetical in nature, but I want to understand this as your initial view, and it may not be something you can answer today. If there's a settlement in any case that you guys are handling of any kind, and then there was a law that was passed that was more restrictive than what that settlement looked like, are the courts generally obligated to, because the settlement occurred before a law was passed, are they generally obligated to uphold the settlement predating that law?
That's a pretty broad question in terms of its application, right? Because the number of settlements and the matters, the issues, the actions upon which you're settling, and in those settlements, there's that injunctive relief, which is what you're referring to, where parties agree they'll do this or they won't do this. And then after that, you have some legislation that governs that same type of activity, right? And does that legislation supersede or somehow preempt the terms of the settlement? And I would have to say it depends.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. With that, we're going to keep the show moving. We appreciate your time. And we will release you to Health and Government Operations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
No worries. All right, so we are going to move along now to the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. So Ms. Rye can begin first with an analysis, and I believe Ms. Compton, the Executive Director, is going to be virtual, as I understand it. Yep. So we'll start with Ms. Rye, and then we'll move to virtual. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I will be presenting the fiscal 26 budget analysis for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. The Commission's aim is to educate both the Maryland citizens and visitors about the importance of the African American history in the state. The Commission also oversees the operation of the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum, whose name was changed from the Banneker Douglas Museum in accordance with chapters 57 and 58 of 24. The cover page chart shows that the fiscal 26 budget for the Commission is $1.8 million, an increase of approximately $200,000 from the fiscal 25 working appropriation. On page 2, Exhibit 1 shows that 75% of the fiscal 26 allowance supports personnel, which includes 11 regular positions, and the remaining funding reflects operational expenses for the museum. On page 3, Exhibit 2 highlights the proposed budget change. The largest increase is driven by expenses for services provided by the Department of Information Technology, which is partially offset by the one-time grant from the Association of African American Museums in fiscal 25. On page 4, personnel data shows that there is no net change in the Commission's regular positions. 2 positions were vacant as of December 31st, 2024, and have been unfilled for less than 6 months. On page 5, Exhibit 3 shows the visitors' engagement with the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum from fiscal 2020 to 24. The blue bars represent in-person visitors and the yellow bars represent online visitors. Starting fiscal 2022, the Commission reported engagement data as in-person and online visitors separately. While the in-person visitors have increased by only 5.5% in fiscal 24, the museum's online engagement has more than doubled to about 300,000 visitors. On page 6, Exhibit 4 shows the various events attended by the commissioners in each fiscal year from 2020 to 24. The commissioners attended a total of 328 events in fiscal 24. As of July 31st, 2024, the commission has 17 commissioners. At the bottom of page 6 and continuing to page 7 is the last key observation. The commission has started reporting 2 new performance indicators: public meeting attendance and out-of-school program attendance, which is a grant-funded program, starting with fiscal 2024 actual data. At the Commission's public meeting in August 24, it was noted that a strategic plan for the Commission is currently being worked on. On page 8 is DLS's recommended action to concur with the Governor's allowance. On page 9 is the appendix. This is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rai. Colleagues, any questions for DLS? Seeing none, we're going to move over to Ms. Compton. I see you're on virtually.
Yes.
You can begin when you're ready.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Wonderful. Greetings, Council Chair and members of the committee. I want to start by thanking our incredible budget analyst, Yashadara, we call AKA Yoshi, Yosho, Rai, for her presentation of our agency's budget. This is our second year working with Ms. Rai, and she is fantastic. As the Executive Director for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, I am proud to report that with the support of the General Assembly on November 1st, on Maryland Emancipation Day, we renamed our state's museum to the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum. Adding Harriet Tubman as our namesake, our museum stands as a beacon of courage and resilience, honoring humanity's greatest freedom fighter and elevating the profound contributions of Black women to our state, our nation, and the enduring fight for justice. In 2024, our agency launched Maryland's Year of Civil Rights in partnership with the Office of Governor Moore, marking the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. Maryland's legacy in the civil rights movement runs deep, from Bell versus Maryland to the Treaty of Cambridge, and through transformative leaders like Senator Verta Freeman Welcome, Chief Justice Thurgood Marshall, and the Reverend Dr. Pauli Murray. Through exhibitions, programs, and partnerships, we're connecting this powerful history to contemporary conversations about justice and equality. Our impact on Maryland's youth is particularly meaningful. Our youth and after-school programs are inspiring the next generation of thought leaders by connecting them to Maryland history, giving them a pride of place and empowerment through creative expression. These programs have become a vital resource for schools across the state, helping young people understand their role in shaping Maryland's future. In addition, our agency also co-administers the African American Heritage Preservation Grant Program, a $5 million capital grant program awarded to African American heritage sites, be it African American cemeteries, schoolhouses, historic churches, community centers, museums across the state of Maryland. This grant is co-administered by Maryland Historical Trust. Together, we're also leading groundbreaking initiatives like the Ancestral Remains Project, a sacred undertaking to properly memorialize and honor 13 African American ancestors whose remains were discovered in Maryland dating back to the 18th century. This work exemplifies our commitment to dignity, respect, and healing and addressing historical injustices. This year, as we develop our 5-year strategic plan, we're reimagining how our museum can serve Maryland and its tourists in new and exciting ways through enhanced spaces for dialogue, expanded preservation efforts, and deeper community partnerships. Our team of 11 dedicated professionals works tirelessly to ensure that Maryland remains at the forefront of preserving and celebrating African American heritage. Your support of our FY 2026 budget will strengthen Maryland's position as a national leader in preserving and celebrating African American heritage, ensuring that these vital stories continue to inspire future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, are there any questions? Executive Director? All right, seeing none, I just want to say it was really good to see that increase on the online viewers, visitors, and I'm sure other agencies or like organizations could probably take some lessons from you all. This was not an analysis. I've just always wondered, do we have any formalized relationship between our museum and the one that the Smithsonian runs in DC?
Yes, relationships in that we serve as advisors between our staff and their staff. We attend and participate at a national conference every year, serving on panels together. So we consistently support each other's programs. And especially in this time, we're really banding together on how we can collectively preserve Black history, art, and culture, both at a national level and a statewide level. So there's a lot of synergy there, but we don't have, as of yet, a formal MOU or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on all the great work.
Thank you.
Colleagues, seeing none questions, we will let you go. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Stay warm out here.
All right, you too.
All right, moving right along, we're going to move to the Department of Service and Civic Innovation. So first we'll have Mr. Cash come up with the DLS analysis, and then Secretary Montero, you and your team can then begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Jacob Cash. I'll be presenting the budget analysis for the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, or DSCI. DSCI is a newer agency combining existing volunteer programs with new service year option pathways established by the SERVE Act and related legislation. If you join me on the cover page, you can see the fiscal 2026 allowance is $56.6 million. However, I will point out that most of the special funds reflected are double counted with general funds that are directly seeding those appropriations. Exhibit 1 on page 2 shows what the DSCI budget looks like without that double count, reflecting the actual amount of total funds available for expenditure. The fiscal 2026 allowance increases by $4.3 million in total funds compared to the fiscal 2025 working appropriation, or by 12% to $41 million. Exhibit 2 on page 3 shows an overview of agency spending. The light blue slice for Maryland Core Special Funds is mostly supported by the 2 green slices representing Maryland Service Year Option and Young Adult Service Year Option pathway funds. The Governor's Office on Service and Volunteerism also administers over $6 million in federal grants for volunteer work, and the remaining $15 million is for administration of the various service programs under DSCI. Exhibit 3 on page 5 shows the proposed budget change of $3.4 million. I will point out $1 million in IT funding for a new customer relationship management system and $500,000 for a new grant management system. DLS recommends reducing the $1 million for the customer relationship management system while retaining the funds for the grant management system. At the bottom of page 6 is a discussion of the BRFA cuts. Current law requires $15 million to be appropriated to the MSY fund each year, but the BRFA would reduce that to $13 million in fiscal 2026 only. and it would retain those future mandates of $20 million starting in 2027. In addition, current law requires DSEI to implement a target for YA pathway participation. While this does not represent a mandated appropriation, a BRFA provision was included to reduce those participation requirements, delaying the year at which the program will be fully expanded, and reducing general funds by $4.8 million, shifting some of the costs to special fund balance. Exhibit 4 on page 7 shows the funding without double counts available in each year for the pathway programs. The current budget plan assumes consistent growth in grant funding and a large growth in administrative expenses related to new positions and new IT projects. The projected participation is 850 in fiscal 2026, which increases from about 550 in 2025, about 250 in 2024. The personnel data section begins on page 8. DSEI is adding 38 regular positions in fiscal 2026, including 12 service success coaches converted from contractual positions. They're also adding 22 new service success coaches and 4 new administrators. These changes add a total of $2.3 million in annual costs, and at the same time, there has been an increase in vacancies. These vacancies are across the department, but they do include 4 vacant administrator positions for Maryland Corps. Underpinning the DSEI projections is the goal ratio of 1 coach to 25 participants. The current ratio based on beginning enrollment is 1 to 50. By applying that ratio to their projected enrollment in fiscal 2026, DLS estimates that only 17 total, or 5 new coaches, are necessary to maintain existing staffing ratios. Therefore, DLS recommends reducing the new positions and associated funding, leaving 5 new positions. This action requires DSEI to use existing vacancies for administrative needs rather than increasing that position allotment. Key observation 1 begins on page 10. Exhibit 5 compares the 2 pathways to each other. Mandated appropriations only apply to the MSY, while participation targets only apply to the YA pathway. The application process is joint, with DSEI sorting applicants into each program based on their eligibility. And DSEI has proposed legislation changing some requirements in the programs, including the requirement that completion awards be offered as Maryland 529 plans, as well as the requirement to report on their use at post-secondary educational institutions. The departmental bill would also allow both pathway funds to be used for either pathway rather than just expansion, and it eliminates the requirement that participants be graduates of Maryland schools. Exhibit 6 on page 11 shows the number of Maryland Corps participants placed in government partner agencies. DSEI reports that 107 total partner organizations hosted Maryland Corps participants in the first cohort, including 14 state and local government agencies. Exhibit 7 on page 12 shows which government agencies have employed graduates of Maryland Corps following program completion. Additionally, at the bottom of page 12 begins a discussion of the subsidization of wages by partner organizations. Stipends are $15 an hour, with DSEI paying approximately $10 and partner organizations paying approximately $5. Committee narrative in 2024 required DSEI to create a plan to have employers pay a greater share of that stipend. DSEI did not decide on one strategy in that report, but they did discuss 3 different wage subsidization strategies that would have varied projected impacts on the composition of partner organizations. And DLS is asking DSEI here to comment on a timeline for developing specific plans and beginning to reduce the level of wage subsidization provided to partner organizations. In Exhibit 8 on page 13, you can see that $8.3 million was paid to participants in stipends for the first cohort of 275 individuals. $1.4 million was provided in completion awards to the 230 graduates who completed the program. Finally, on page 14, Exhibit 9 shows select program measurement data for the volunteer programs operated under the Governor's Office of Service and Volunteerism. The data show an increase in participation despite a decrease in funding in fiscal 2025, so DLS is asking DSEI to comment on that projection. There's also information regarding the sunsetting of Volunteer Maryland. DSCI reports that the program was ended because its impact had declined and resources could be used more efficiently elsewhere. Recommended actions are on page 15. Item 1 reduces funds for the new customer relationship system, while item 2 reduces funds for new positions. With that, my presentation is concluded, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Colleagues, any questions for DLS? Seeing none, good to see you, Secretary Montero and team. You all can begin when you are ready.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And the members of the subcommittee, thank you for your time. For the record, my name is Paul Montero. I have the blessing of serving as the Secretary of the Department of Service and Civic Innovation. Here with me today are my colleagues, our Deputy Secretary, Sarah Flamang, and our Interim CFO, Lisa Bishop. And if there are no objections, they'll help briefly with the presentation today. I want to acknowledge the important and incredible work of Mr. Cash. It's been great working with him and appreciate the in-depth analysis he shared. As a relatively small and certainly new department with a very complex structure, he's put in the work and time to help us work through and understand the nuances of the Department of Service and Civic Innovation. Certainly want to thank the administration for our budget proposal, which took into account the state's fiscal realities by including a target for the young adult service year option pathway of 750 members in fiscal year 2026, which is lower than the originally planned 1,000 members, and reduced the general fund request by approximately $4.8 million. The governor's proposed budget allocations allow the department to fulfill his priority of leaving no Marylander behind and ensuring that opportunities exist for everyone in our program to secure well-paying jobs. And in addition, the Maryland Core Service Year Option program will expand apprenticeships and career pathways to bridge the gap between job seekers and employers. Less than 2 years ago, the General Assembly passed the Serving Every Region Through Vocational Exploration Act, or the SERV Act, establishing the Maryland Core program with 2 key pathways: the service year option for those who have graduated or completed high school in the last 3 years, and the Maryland Core pathway open to anyone over 18, completing a 9-month term of service. I just want to highlight a few pieces. The department was created in April of 2023, and in about 6 months, we launched the inaugural class of Maryland Core with members serving in both the young adult pathway and the Maryland Core pathway. We launched with more than 200 members in October of 2023, and they completed their term of service in August of 2024. After completing their term, they earn a statutorily required completion award of $6,000 to put into action their plan of what comes next, whether apprenticeship, college, career, or continued service. The inaugural class gained invaluable skills, with over 170 of them earning U.S. Department of Labor recognized credentials, over 2,500 certified competencies, and completing 42,000 hours of technical training while they were with us. Our written testimony included a number of examples of the type of service our members are rendering across the state. Just in the interest of time, I just want to mention 2. Justin joined us after working a series of retail jobs. His service with the nonprofit Love Wins was where we placed him after coming to us from a place of not knowing where he belonged and deep uncertainty. But through his service at the Love Wins nonprofit, he shared he's gained confidence, opportunity, and experience to transition into a full-time position as an Equity and Human Rights Fellow with the Anne Arundel County Executive's Office, while concurrently serving as a second-year leader in our program. A proud Prince Georgian, Mauricio, joined us after serving as a cashier at a few gas stations while working on his undergraduate degree. He was placed with the Department of Veterans and Military Families, where his contributions were recognized, such that he was hired on in a full-time role to establish the department's constituent services outreach component. We checked in with Secretary Woods over the weekend. In the last year, since Mo has been in place, he's engaged over 800 veterans and military families. Class 2 kicked off September 11th of 2024 with nearly 600 members, more than double the size of the initial cohort. And we deliberately launched on September 11th, as it is a National Day of Service. Because of the hard work of this team, the second class represents every one of Maryland's 23 counties and Baltimore City. We have members from every part of the state. And they're serving at nearly 200 employers statewide. and more than 20 state and local government agencies. I do want to make one note on the federal picture. We are focused on making Maryland a state that serves and recognizing the many ways Marylanders serve every day. There are nearly 1,100 AmeriCorps members serving across our state and thousands more touched by the Senior Corps programs, the Foster Grandparent Program and the Senior Companion Program. So DSCI's overall portfolio is directly impacted by a federal freeze of dollars coming from the National Service Agency, AmeriCorps. So we're closely following developments out of Washington to see what comes, because changes or any diminishment of funds would have an adverse impact on what service looks like and service serving some of our most vulnerable neighbors. But with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague who will zero in on the 4 key areas identified in the DLS analysis, starting with the customer relationship management system. So over to our interim CFO, Lisa Bishop.
Thank you, Secretary. For the record, I'm Lisa Bishop, Interim Chief Financial Officer. As you just heard from Mr. Cash, DLS proposed about $1 million reduction in a customer relationship management system, or CRM, due to the state's financial picture and the early stages of our program implementation. This, for us, would delay the procurement of an initial CRM system. And while we appreciate the reasons for this recommendation, we do want to be clear that this is actually not an enhancement, but it would provide a foundational system for us to build on, a very basic system that would replace program and grants management that's usually using a number of highly integrated spreadsheets and other documents. Additionally, we anticipate that the ongoing cost of a CRM to maintain it would be fairly minimal. It really is the first year cost of setting up that system and getting it fully operational. We believe that it's warranted given the number of members and organizations we would continue to partner with over the years. The next key area that was identified was the personnel data, which relates to contractual conversions and additional PENs. They recommend the removal of several Admin Officer 3 positions, also known as our Service Success Coaches, reducing the budget by about $1.3 million. The Admin Officer Success Coaches are critical to the success of our program, particularly looking at the way that they support our members through all parts of the program and then thinking about what comes next. The governor's proposed budget included a ratio of 25 members to 1 coach, and then the DLS proposal recommends doubling that to 1 to 50. So we believe that the coaches provide this integral service, again, during the program, and then as they figure out what they do next throughout the program. We partially concur with this recommendation and would like to reduce the ratio to 1 to 24 as a compromise position. This would ensure that members actually get the support that they need without dramatically impacting the impact of the program. Additionally, DLS proposed a budget reduction of about $300,000 for 2 new Administrator 2 positions and 2 new Administrator 4 positions. We also partially concur with this recommendation and are considering other ways to meet those duties initially designed for those positions. I think it's worth noting that if we got the CRM system, those positions would not be quite as essential because the CRM would replace some of the highly manual work that our team is currently doing and is anticipated to do as we go on. The third and fourth areas are areas that DLS asked that we comment on, which are the wage subsidization and the cost sharing of host site partners. For that, I will turn it over to our Deputy Secretary.
Thank you, Lisa. For the record, my name is Sarah Fleming, Deputy Secretary for DSCI. The Department of Legislative Services recommended that the department discusses and develops specific plans and begins to reduce the level of wage subsidization to maximize use of funding for the program going forward. The department submitted a joint chairman's report in December 2024 on the goal of moving towards increasing the cost sharing for host site partners. Building on significant progress, including doubling required contributions from host site partners from Class 1 to Class 2, the department's phased strategy emphasizes equity, accessibility, and financial sustainability. Diversifying our host site partner pool, implementing scalable cost-sharing models, and leveraging public-private partnerships, the department is laying the groundwork to support 2,000 members by 2026 to 2027, while also maintaining its commitment to maximizing public resources. For Class 3, which will be the class during fiscal year 2026, DSCI has implemented a tiered cost-sharing plan for all partners that would result in a 33% of all wages subsidized in Class 3. These tiers were established to allow organizations of all sizes to participate, but also to promote wage subsidization needed to continue to grow the program. While the smallest organizations will be responsible for approximately 20% of the wages for members, the largest host site partners will be responsible for nearly all of their members' wages. And in the year 2027, DSCI plans to increase requirements accordingly to achieve 50% wage cost sharing in the subsequent year. You can see the details of this plan in the written testimony as well. The last key area identified in the DLS analysis is the Governor's Office of Service and Volunteerism, also referred to as GOSV. The Department of Legislative Services recommended that DSCI provide additional information on why funding increased by 42.5% in fiscal 2024 and how GOSV will maintain elevated levels of volunteers despite less grant funding. The Governor's Office on Service and Volunteerism's funding increased by 42.5% in fiscal year 2024, largely due to American Rescue Plan Act funds. Using those funds, we were able to invest in supporting the preparation and planning of AmeriCorps programming in Maryland through strategic investments meant to allow for thoughtful and well-planned programming, and also to set up programs to maintain their impact and volunteer numbers long-term. In conclusion, we understand and appreciate the challenges that lie ahead with the state's budget. The department remains grateful for the ongoing support to ensure that we can continue to expand opportunities for Marylanders to address critical community needs. I want to end by sharing that less than 2 years after the passage of the SERVE Act, creating the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, the application for Class 3 launched yesterday and is available at serve.maryland.gov, and we would welcome all of your support in helping to spread the word among your constituents about the opportunity. We are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you all very much. Always good to see you, fellow Prince Georgian.
Good to see you, sir.
Mr. Montero. Colleagues, any questions for DSCI? Vice Chair Cheng.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, and your staff. Thank you very much for being here. I have a question for the Chief Financial Officer. The ratio, I just want to get clarification on the ratio of coach to participants that you had mentioned. What was the alternative that the agency thought of?
So we would like to go with about a 1:35 ratio,
1
which
to 35,
is what we were at when we're fully staffed this year, versus the 1:50 that was what DLS proposed.
Okay, so 1:35.
Yes, and
okay.
in the governor's budget, it was 1:25, so we understand that we probably need to increase that, but feel like we can still maintain the basic level of services we need at 1:35.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question, Mr. Secretary. Congratulations on this being your third cohort, and you mentioned about the testimony about Justin, and I've had the opportunity to meet Justin and serve along with him at the Loved Ones Pantry in Severn, and I know he's alongside him served thousands of individuals and families with food insecurity. So it's great to see that he's now with the Anne Arundel County government and serving in that capacity. I have a question regarding if you have any data on either over the 3 years or individually as far as the completion rate, if there's any of that data available.
Yes, thank you for the question, Vice Chair. And thank you for the ongoing support. I'm glad you encountered Justin as he's serving around the community. We do have, for the first cohort, we ended with an 84% retention rate, which is exceeded my expectations. I used to be the director of AmeriCorps Vista, the Domestic Peace Corps, and a first-year program out the gate to have an 84% retention rate is a good number, and we want to continue to bolster that. And we are going to continue being a heart-led and data-driven organization because the third-party evaluation baked into this tracks where these individuals go after leaving us. Where are they a year from now? Where are they 3 years from now? Where are they 5 years from now? So we're about to administer the post-service survey for members that served in the first class. We've partnered with a third-party evaluator to begin the process of ascertaining where our members are moving on in their lives and careers and professions.
Thank you. And for those individuals who did not complete the program, are there any data captured on that, either qualitative or quantitative results that were obtained of why the young people were not completing the program, and if there's any ways to, be able to help them in the future complete the program, this wonderful program? Thank you.
Yes, sir. We're definitely tracking closely the reasons for separation. Again, the design here is to build in wraparound supports and connect people with things so that the flat tire on their car is not the end of the road for them. There's an emergency fund paid for with outside dollars that can help insulate our members from things that would take them out of service. But where there are life situations, demands that people are under that require them to move on, we track it closely to learn how we can either better support people and keep them in the program or find the best placements for them based on where they are in their lives.
From the recent cohorts, or the first two and now the third, is there any common theme or any underlying reasons that seem to, any ways that we may be more supportive of getting to 100% completion ratio?
Thank you for the question. And I don't want to go off and anecdotally, what I do recall is members that are in acute situations in terms of family responsibilities, the need to rapidly increase their income because of obligations of that sort. Transportation remains a challenge as we see it statewide, and housing needs as well, and people having to address their living situations. But we can get you a more detailed information about that. But the wraparound supports, to me, they're a material difference. It's one of the things that makes this First in the Nation program so unique, of having, through the success coaches, working with our members week to week to understand the life situations that threaten their continuation and mitigating those impacts as best as possible.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the answers.
Support,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, colleagues, any other questions for DSCI? Seeing none, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, so now, last but certainly not least, we're going to transition to Department of Corrections. Ms. Barber, you can begin when you are ready with your analysis, and then Secretary and team, then we'll move to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Barber, and today I will be presenting the fiscal 26 budget analysis for DPSCS corrections. The fiscal 26 budget totals $1.1 billion and saw a $10 million increase, or 0.9%, from fiscal 2025. I'll start with some performance metrics. Exhibit 1 on page 4 shows that the average daily population, or ADP, of sentenced offenders in DPSCS custody has increased annually since the pandemic, and increased by about 4% in fiscal 2024 to 16,085 offenders. However, the current population is significantly lower than historic trends. For instance, it was 23% higher in fiscal 2014. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the monthly ADP since calendar 2019. The dotted line shows the population if pre-pandemic trends had continued, and the light shaded area shows the population if current trends continue. These two lines are set to cross in June 2025, indicating that the permanent effect of the pandemic on population growth may be minimal. Exhibit 3 on page 6 shows the shares of inmates across age groups. The average age of individuals in DPSCS custody was 39.6 in fiscal 24, which is an increase of nearly 2 years from the pandemic. Additionally, there's been a 43% decline of young people in the state prison system since 2015. Exhibit 4 on page 7 shows the average length of stay in fiscal 2024 is 7.6 years, which is a 2% decline from fiscal 23. The majority of sentenced individuals in DPSCS custody in fiscal 24 were incarcerated for violent crimes as their most serious offense, which connects to Exhibit 5 on page 8. which groups the incarcerated population by sentence length. The exhibit shows that the majority of those in DPSCS custody were serving medium-term or extended sentences, which connects to the violent crime statistic. Notably, Exhibit 6 on page 9 shows that assault rates on staff and other incarcerated individuals in fiscal 24 increased. The individual-on-individual assault rate increased to 9.81 per 100 ADP, which is more than twice the goal and a 54% increase over the year prior. The individual-on-staff assault rate increased to 5.38 per 100, which is more than triple the goal of 1.63. DPSCS also reported 5 homicides in its correctional facilities, which is an increase of 2 from fiscal 23. DPSCS should discuss the reasons for the upward trending assault rates and efforts that it is taking to reduce assaults on incarcerated individuals and staff in correctional facilities. Moving on to the budget, the fiscal 26 allowance for corrections contains deficiency appropriations totaling $76.9 million in general funds and $5 million in special funds. The 2 largest deficiency appropriations are $40.6 million to cover shortfalls in operating costs in fiscal 24 and $35.8 million to fund increased inmate health costs resulting from a change in contractor. Of the $1.1 billion allowance, $644.4 million supports regular personnel, mainly for employing correctional officers. Exhibit 7 on page 11 shows the other portions of the budget, with inmate medical care accounting for about a quarter of spending. Exhibit 8 on page 12 breaks down the $10 million budget change into items and programs with major changes. The majority of the increase is due to an increase of $10.2 million in special funds to purchase raw materials for Maryland Correctional Enterprises. Now onto personnel. The fiscal 26 allowance contains 4,930 regular positions, which is a net decrease of 107 from fiscal 25. The majority of this decrease is for CO positions that have been transferred from corrections to administration and reclassified into positions over there. Exhibit 9 on page 15 shows those transfers by category. In January 2025, 4,296 of the 4,788 allowed CO positions were filled, meaning a vacancy rate of about 10.3%. There are 4 issues discussed in this analysis. The first one is the treatment of transgender individuals under the care of DPSCS. Transgender individuals in the prison system are subject to high rates of violence and sexual abuse, both within the state of Maryland and nationally, from both correctional officers and fellow inmates. There have been numerous settlements over the years following instances of violence, sexual assault, harassment, and unwarranted use of solitary confinement. According to DPSCS, there were 3 settlements involving transgender inmates in calendar 24, amounting to about $835,000. These settlements comprised about 38% of the total amount spent on settlements in calendar 24, despite transgender inmates representing less than 0.5% of the total population in custody. In October 2024, BPW approved a $750,000 settlement, which was about half general funds and half special funds, paid to Amber Cantor, a transgender woman who accused 3 correctional officers of assaulting her and placing her in an illegal chokehold in June 2019 while she was on pretrial hold at BC-BIC. The settlement establishes individuals with gender dysphoria as a protected class under the Americans with Disabilities Act and gives transgender inmates grounds to sue if they are mistreated or improperly accommodated. Housing of transgender individuals is governed by the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which aims to reduce sexual violence in prisons and mandates that inmate housing be informed by a risk assessment of each inmate's likelihood of being sexually abused. The risk assessment is based on several factors, including gender identity and an inmate's own perception of their vulnerability. Current policy mandates that transgender inmates be housed based on physical genitalia, but administrative segregation is optional for those who cannot be housed with others of their gender identity. However, it is illegal to require such housing simply because someone is transgender. In current events, a recent White House executive order from January 20 of this year directed the U.S. Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security to ensure prisoners are housed on the basis of biological sex. The executive order specifies that if necessary, the administration will move to amend the Prison Rape Elimination Act and provide quote-unquote interpretation guidance regarding the ADA to ensure compliance. An amendment to the Prison Rape Elimination Act may weaken protection standards for Maryland prisons and place transgender inmates at an increased risk of violence. DLS is unable to provide fiscal 24 data on the number of transgender inmates under the state's care because the JCR report due in October 2024 has not been submitted. According to a past report, there were approximately 72 transgender individuals in DPSCS custody in fiscal 23, which was 0.4% of the total corrections and pretrial population. The department reported that it is conducting research on best practices in other states and engaging LGBTQ advocates and internal stakeholders to revise policies related to housing assignments, transfer protocols, restrictive housing practices, and medical and mental health services to ensure compliance with federal standards and the Prison Rape Elimination Act. The agency reported that it recently reclassified and updated one position within the Office of Fair Practices and Inclusion to hire a subject matter expert, and that the executive director of that office recently held a half-day training for wardens, assistant wardens, and the executive leadership team to focus on LGBTQ issues and provide updates for the Prison Rape Elimination Act. DLS recommends restricting $100,000 in general funds pending a report from DPSCS that provides data on the transgender individuals in correctional facilities and the amount the state has paid in settlements related to mistreatment from fiscal 21 to 25. This recommendation and all others can be found in the recommended action section on page 21. The second issue I'll discuss regards a fiscal compliance audit issued in June 2024 for the period of April 1st, 2019 to June 30, 2023. OLA found that Maryland Correctional Enterprises, MCE, did not adequately pursue the collection of millions of dollars in delinquent accounts receivable. And as of June 2023, MCE was owed $12.9 million, of which $7 million or 54% was outstanding over 90 days. Of that total amount, $12.5 million or 97% was from state agencies, and $6.7 million of that was outstanding for more than 90 days. Based on state regulations, state agencies can't be referred to the Central Collection Unit for collection action, which inhibits MCE's ability to collect those outstanding payments from the majority of its customers. However, OLA did note that MCE did not issue any dunning notices to 3 of 5 delinquent accounts from state agencies. DPSCS has developed an escalation process to handle those outstanding balances from other state agencies, and these steps are described on page 18. As of December 31st, 2024, MCE had escalated the top 10 customers with the highest past due balances to the Secretary's office, and the Secretary is sending letters to the leaders of those agencies. There was also $371,000 from non-state entities that was past due, with $286,000 of that outstanding for more than 90 days. CCU requires that accounts that have been outstanding for more than 120 days be referred to them, but OLA found that MCE did not refer its delinquent accounts, even when some had been outstanding for up to 774 days. according to CCU, MCE had not referred any accounts since August 2018. DPSCS has established similar procedures to the procedures describing working with state customers to ensure they collect past due payments from non-state customers, and has additional tools at its disposal because it can utilize the central collection unit. DPSCS reported that as of December 31st, 2024, there were a total of 8 non-state agencies with past due balances, all of which had been referred for collection. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a report from DPSCS, including the number of delinquent payments that have been resolved, broken out by state and non-state customers, as well as an update on any delinquent accounts that have accrued since the audit. The third issue is a quick update on the reentry passport program, which is seeking to provide pre-release inmates with online access to their identifying documents to prepare them for release. This program has faced delays since its pilot in fiscal 2023, during which only 4 inmates were able to create email addresses and use the document portal. This was because of issues with limited computer and internet access that continue to halt the rollout that was planned for fiscal 24. As of the submission of the October 2024 JCR report, DPSCS stated that 278 case management and reentry staff are approved to use the portal to upload documents on behalf of consenting inmates. And currently, 294 individuals are released monthly from custody. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a report from DPSCS on the reentry passport program rollout, and this report should document the progress of expanding the existing pilot and future plans to implement the program. The last issue I'll discuss relates to women's pre-release programming at MCIW, which is a high security facility. Chapter 16 of 2021 mandated that DPSCS build and begin operating a pre-release unit for women by November 2023. This project is significantly behind schedule and is now estimated to be completed in fiscal 2030. While the facility has been delayed, DPSCS is still required to provide pre-release services to incarcerated women in its custody. This programming is taking the form of Project Fresh. In Project Fresh, participants have access to educational and vocational training, as well as trauma-informed therapy, parenting workshops, substance use disorder treatment, and work release opportunities. However, those opportunities, particularly related to work release and the independence that typically comes with pre-release programs, are more limited than in men's pre-release complexes due to the operational challenges associated with running a pre-release program out of a high security facility. In Project Fresh, the women are integrated with other women who are not enrolled in the program, which is part of the reason it has struggled with low participation rates. Slightly more than 1/3 of eligible women have opted into the program as of July 2024. Additionally, staffing shortages have impacted implementation. There are no staff members dedicated to the unit, and the 2 employees who work on the unit, a social worker and a reentry specialist, also are responsible for providing services to the rest of the MCIW population. These conditions have significant implications for equity in terms of post-release employment, which is strongly correlated with reduced recidivism. While men in Maryland have access to dedicated pre-release complexes with low security and more opportunities to work, gain independence, and reintegrate prior to their release, women's only access to pre-release programming is through a high-security prison. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a report from DPSCS about Project Fresh participation rates and programming with particular emphasis on work release opportunities. The report should compare participation and pre-release programming opportunities to men's pre-release centers. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barber. Colleagues, any questions for DLS? Seeing none, Madam Secretary and team, you all can approach and begin when you are ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Lewis, members of the Public Safety Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, and I'm the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today are Mr. Joseph Sadal, Deputy Secretary of Administration, and Phil Morgan, Acting Commissioner for the Division of Corrections. The department appreciates the collaboration with the Department of Legislative Services and Ms. Barber's hard work and analysis. I would also like to take time to give thanks to DBM analyst Christina Jorge Tuyon for the advice and guidance she provided during the budget submission process. I would like to begin by recognizing the staff who work in the Division of Corrections. These are individuals who do incredible work every day. As a 30-year employee of the department, I am honored to be here today to testify not only on the budget, but on behalf of the dedicated, hardworking professionals who come to work every day and uphold our mission of protecting the public, its employees, detainees, and offenders under our supervision. The analysis contains one issue for the department's response and 4 recommendations. DLS has requested the department comment on the reasons for the upward trending assaults rates and efforts that it's taking to reduce assaults on incarcerated individuals and staff in correctional facilities. The department's Intelligence and Investigation Division investigates all reported serious incidents that occur within our facilities, which includes assaults among the incarcerated population and assaults on officers and staff. Over the past 10 years, the department's sentence population has increasingly trended towards more individuals serving sentences for person-based crimes, as the number of individuals serving shorter and nonviolent offenses has decreased. This has resulted in an overall change in the incarcerated population, where the majority of the sentence population has committed at least one person-based offense. The department saw a sharp change over the past year as the number of individuals newly sentenced to custody for murder or manslaughter increased by 55% compared to pre-COVID numbers, compared to the pre-COVID period. The number of individuals entering the department's custody for weapons-related offenses also increased by 27%. Based on our analysis from investigations into serious incident reports, the upward trend can also be attributed to a sharp increase in the introduction of undetectable forms of contraband. In particular, there has been an increase in the volume of mail that has been laced with controlled dangerous substances, which are undetectable and without current inspection practices. This is especially specifically through protected forms of mail, such as our legal mail, where we're seeing a lot of the undetected contraband come in. Recent interdiction and assault reports identify the relationship between assaults and increased attempts to introduce synthetic cannabinoids, which are directly associated with violent assaults and are difficult or impossible to detect with the standard drug testing methods in place. Contraband not only compromises the safety of the incarcerated individuals, but it also compromises safety of our staff and our visitors. It contributes to illegal activities, undermines the security of the facility, and often leads to violent incidents. In response to these trends, the department has undertaken a number of corrective actions to address the safety needs of staff, the needs of the incarcerated population, and the challenges to facility safety. At the beginning of this fiscal year, the department developed a new monthly assault analysis report, which allowed facility leadership and Union Health and Safety Committee members to collaborate and review and address assault issues at each facility. Since the implementation of this new reporting in FY 2025, assaults have decreased by 23.5% overall, and assaults on staff decreasing more than assaults among those of the incarcerated population. To bring more programming to the incarcerated population, the department has added additional training, education, entertainment, and cognitive applications to the tablets. The department has also continued to make correctional officer hiring one of the top priorities to reduce overtime and increase services for the incarcerated population. The latest academy began this week with 43 recruits enrolled. Over the next month, the recruitment unit has 11 community hiring events scheduled from the Eastern Shore to Western Maryland. Entrance level and annual in-service training includes lesson plans on implicit bias and cultural diversity training to aid staff in better mediating and de-escalating conflicts between staff and incarcerated populations. To improve facility security, the department upgraded the camera systems in all DPSCS facilities as the first phase of its surveillance enhancement plan. The second phase will include additional cameras to enhance coverage to those areas that are not currently monitored by the existing camera and/or where custody staff are not posted. To respond to safety needs of staff who are mobile within the facility, the department developed a pilot body-worn camera program, which is launching on February 19th. Based on outcomes seen in other states that have adopted this technology, the department expects the implementation of body-worn cameras to have a positive impact on improving safety in the facilities. And I did bring one with me today to share with you so that you can see that technology. This technology has been shown to have a deterrent and de-escalatory effect, even in early demonstrations in the department. This enhancement will also provide evidence in assault cases, supporting the department's ability to limit liability and potential settlement agreements and pursue charges for assault among the incarcerated population. Over the next 2 months, the pilot will be rolled out to 5 facilities, allowing the department to evaluate initial impacts and staff implementation needs. In conclusion, I'd like to say that I am always proud of the employees of this department, the dedicated team of staff, officers, and managers and community partners that we have, and we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. It's good to see your team. Colleagues, do you all have any questions? Delegate Stanko.
Yeah, I hope I didn't miss this, but can you talk to the what the steps MCE is taking to collect the $13 million in uncollected payments he still has?
Sure, thank you for that question. So MCE had about $12 million that had not been collected when they notified me. I did reach out to agency heads as well as secretaries to notify them of that, my concern. As of today, $8 million of that has been collected, so we're still working on the other three or four that's due.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, any further questions? All right, I have a few. The first one I'll ask is on behalf of, I think he's at a hearing right now, but it's actually on behalf of Delegate Schindler, which is in relation to the reentry passport program. And I think his question was just wondering, you know, when, as far as the timeline, when do we think it will be fully implemented, for one? And we are wondering for, at least as we are trying to roll out this program, what have been the costs? Because I know it's been delayed a little bit, so how much does it cost us to run or try to put this together thus far?
So I'm happy to get you the cost analysis for it. What we're doing right now is we are facilitating an official MOU with Maryland Think, because one of the things that we reviewed was that there was never an official MOU created with the prior administration. So my assistant secretary that is in charge of that division is working on that MOU as we speak. We actually spoke about it on yesterday. And then we'll be happy to follow up and get you those costs incurred. But there are staff that have been trained on it, case managers that have been trained on the system that are using that system. And there are documents related to the incarcerated individuals' release that have been downloaded. I know as of yesterday, were over 800 documents that had already been downloaded. These include birth certificates. They'll include any type of identifications they had, credentialing that they received while they were incarcerated, if they received national certifications and any type of occupational skills and training. One of the big barriers that we do have with this system is the need for the incarcerated person to have an email address in order to access it. So we're trying to work through that now because, you know, of course, as an incarcerated individual, you can't have an email behind the walls. So those are some of the things that we're working through.
Okay. It's really good to hear that. One thing I wanted to ask you is, this is new knowledge for me, but I've been made aware that some from detention facilities as well as other correction department are starting to leverage the blockchain as a place to store some of these records. I'm just wondering, have you all considered utilizing that? We are in a new world with technology here, but another maybe cost-effective way to securely, as soon as someone enters the system, place all their sensitive and core records such that when they, as you know, the overwhelming majority leave the care of the state, it's in a secure and accessible place for them. I hear that some departments are starting to look at blockchain as like an option. So if you haven't yet, I would love to hear what you guys, once you poke around, if you're interested in it at all, but I thought to ask you about it.
No, I'm not familiar with blockchain, but we'll certainly look into it, sir.
Sure. Okay. So one of the other questions I had was on, I was not aware that MCE could work with non-state actors. You know, so could you elaborate for me a little bit on when I think it said non-state actors, like who is that, like who does that entail as I think as their clients? Maybe I'm saying the name wrong. But some of the money that was owed, I think, was not from state actors. And I'm just wondering, what would that be? Would that be local governments?
Yeah, let us get that information for you. Non-state actors.
Non-state customers, sorry. Yeah, they said there are delinquent accounts from non-state customers. I was just wondering what would qualify as a non-state customer? Because my understanding, they only served state agencies. And I'm just going to come out and say, if they are servicing private industry, I think some of my colleagues would be a little concerned. So if non-state customers are localities, that's, you know, that'd be something for us to talk about, which is fine. It's still government, but we'd like to know what that is.
So if I may, my suspicion, and obviously we can look at the documentation to actually see what the O's are, but we're talking nonprofits are able to utilize MCE services, university system, local governments are able to use it, I believe. So that's my suspicion, but we're happy to pull that information and give you a more detailed answer.
Yeah, I assumed that like colleges and universities came up as part of state, you know, if it's just a categorization issue, I understand. But yeah, if you could run through that, that would be great. I also had another question. Of course, we come back to women's pre-release programming. As you know, is really important to us. You know, we'll talk about that separately on a capital side, but just even on the programming, all the things that DLS has already said on Project Refresh. I know you all are building your capacity to help the women there in getting the gainful employment and stuff that they need. But I just want to know if you can elaborate a little bit more, because we did pass a law that has some requirements that relate to some of the programming, and where it's currently at MCIW, I understand it's limited just based off the proximity. But if you can elaborate more what you're trying to do there.
So we did transform a dormitory environment at MCIW into what we call our Project Fresh, which is serves as our pre-release function. Anyone that is eligible or classified as a pre-release status is eligible to be there, as long as they don't have any adjustment history or concerns. And I just was recently there, actually on site with the ladies. There is a dedicated case manager as well as social worker right there in the dormitory environment that stays there, that's available to them. Most of the women are going to school during the day or going to jobs during the day. They move just as if they were in a pre-release facility. And then there is programming that is done throughout the day. For example, when I was there that day, there was a religious services program that was going on with the women. There are wellness programs that come in. So our community partners are coming in day and evening to make sure we continue to support the women with their transitions back into the community. It is it's open dormitory, so we allow them to go and come as if they were in the community. It is up to them to end up with some type of infraction that removes them from that opportunity, because we are trying to make them responsible. We make them responsible for their medication by giving it to them as if they were in the community and not having them have a watch-take type situation where others may have to. So it's more like it's an honor tier. It really is. And we try to keep it that way because we want to, there's been no violence there. It keeps the violence down on there, and it really helps them to transfer back in a more smoother opportunity as they go back into the community.
That's great. One of the questions actually on this I also had was like for the women who are leaving the campus for workforce opportunities, can you elaborate how they get to there? Because I've heard some information that they may be traveling in like marked vans, which obviously would indicate to people, where they're headed home in, versus I know in some of the men's facilities, some of them have the options, I think, for unmarked vans for their travel. I've just gotten a question about that. Can you clarify how are they able to reach those employment opportunities?
It really depends on the employment opportunity and where they're going.
Okay.
Some of them, just like the men, they are able to go out on their own. Some of the employees actually come and pick them up. So some of the marked vans that they're seeing may be the employer's van. Yes, because a lot of them will come and pick them up.
Okay. I have another. So on the assaults and the homicides that we saw, I wanted to clarify. One of the things you said, we've had an uptake in mail that's come, particularly mail that's laced with different things. But some of these assaults and particularly the homicides, it's people are getting hurt violently. So I guess what I'm saying is, are you connecting the uptick in mail and substances coming through to like them drugging each other, or my understanding is the homicides are more like violent interactions.
There's a combination. We have a more violent offender that we're servicing right now. And when we had 2017, when JRA came in, we ended up with graduated sanctions. We ended up with citations that eliminated a lot of the sentencing for misdemeanors because you could get a citation for it. So we saw a trend in us starting to receive those individuals that are sentenced for your #1 felony offenses. So we have the more violent offenders. Outside of having that violent offender, they're also connected with strategic threat groups. So there are enemies within our environment, and of course they don't get along, and then there's friction there. So our staff have to be very diligent because we don't always know that an individual is the enemy to someone else until something has happened, because everyone does not automatically during their case management review identify as part of a gang or whatever. And that can then lead to assaults at that point. As far as the contraband that is coming in, society has become very unique and very creative in the introduction of contraband. And we're seeing a lot of it come through the legal mail, which truly is not legal mail if you see it. And legal mail is not supposed to be open until it's in front of that individual. So that's a piece of mail that we can't automatically open. We open it directly in front of the individual. But what they're doing is they're lacing the paper with CDS. You can go on Amazon and buy it. It's already laced with CDS. They have become so creative that the Suboxone, they're able to actually put it under the stamp or put it actually in between paper, in between a sheet of paper. So, and it's something that our dogs are not detecting right now. So we're finding that there are a lot of creative ways that they're reintroducing this contraband back in.
I remember at one point we did a tour. This is maybe when I was still in judiciary with McComas, and
I just have a couple of questions.
well, let me finish mine real quick, and I'll go to you. Which was no worries, that's fine. But it was the issue of drones. A couple of years back, I remember of people essentially having drones come over and dropping things.
We did.
Is that still an issue too? I know
We
at the time.
we have a great drone detection system now,
Okay.
which has really been helping us mitigate the risk associated with that. But you're correct. Out west in our mountain areas where we have our facilities in Cumberland, we were seeing a lot of drones. They were bringing them over that mountain and dropping them right in to North Branch. And then in the city at the Maryland Reception and Diagnostic Center right there on Greenmount, we were seeing the drones being, if you're familiar with it, they're adjacent to public housing, and we would see the drones come from public housing over, and they were dropping them onto the roof there where the outside recreation is. But we have seen a decrease with our drone detection because now we can mitigate that.
Got it. Awesome. Delegate McCombs, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple, and I might miss what you're thinking about, but on the ketamine that's coming in, does that create a person being violent, like if they take PCP? Do you know? Or is it more of a, like a, what do I want to say? Like a sedative type of thing?
If you don't mind. Very good question. Thank you. What we have noticed on some of the papers that have come in, they are being laced with insect such as Raid, and that's some of the stuff that you can buy literally through Amazon or through the internet. And then when they ingest that or smoke it, it does create a similar to PCP hallucinations or actually body functions, where their body will twist. We actually have videos of someone that might be on that, and it does become, it's a violent reaction. It truly is, but it's just some of those items that are that, such as rape. We have detected that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, the other question I have is there any way that that you can detect it? So there's really no way to.
There's nothing out there right now. We can tell, if you look at the paper close enough, that you can tell the color change. And a lot of our search teams that are trained in that, they have a keen eye for what they're looking for. So yes, there's a way to weed.
Now, the other thing I was kind of wondering about is, the fact that some different states have experimented with having service animals or training animals, whether it's dogs or cats, and kind of, that the inmates got something to take care of. Do you think those programs would help alleviate some of the violence?
We have that already with our canine. Our canine will detect such as cocaine, heroin, marijuana. They're very good at that right now. But as far as those items that we just discussed that are new coming in through the market, that's not been.
Well, what I was thinking about is like you have animals that stay with the inmate that they have a buddy that they, And,
we do, Madam Delegate, we do. We have American vet dogs as well as Warrior Canine. And we have what are called inmate handlers. They usually get those puppies when they're maybe about 3 months old. They train them for 6 months to a year. On the weekend, we have a community partner that comes in and takes the dog out on the weekend, but they actually live in the environment. Actually, at Project Fresh, we have some ladies that have a couple of dogs. They actually live in the environment with the incarcerated individual, and those incarcerated individuals are very proud of the training that they've done for much
So
of
has
it.
that, so where the animals have been with the inmate and the training, do those different cell blocks or whatever have a lower incident of the violence?
Oh, absolutely. We're not seeing violence in those areas.
Okay. So the other question I have is, I know that our sheriff is really very good at spotting out the different gangs and making sure that keep everybody separated within the local detention center. Do you have any ability through whoever you get sent, that they go from the locals, they're sentenced, and then they go to the state penitentiaries and locations? Do you get any of that information that they gleaned that can help you, so you make sure that John and Jacob aren't together, then they're on opposite gangs?
We absolutely do, and that is part of the case management review, the risk assessment that is done so that we know how to place individuals. But then there are some that simply do not tell you until they do something what we call drop their flag, where they no longer want to be part of that gang that they've been part of. And then at that point, they become compromised. And that's when you see a lot of the violence start to happen.
Do you have any ideas of what you would like if you had an unlimited budget? Is there anything you would like? I'm just saying, that
you're not required to answer that.
Well, look, I mean, we might as well dream. I'm imagining here, okay? No, that you think might be helpful to what's going on in your facilities.
Well, I think one of the things, like I said, I did bring it with me to share with you. This is the body-worn camera that we're going to be using and implementing. This is going to help as a real deterrent with assaults. Not only is it going to do that, it's going to also show how professional our staff are, and it's going to mitigate the risk of us having all of these settlements that we have, because it'll show that the staff did what they were supposed to do, and that it was truly the incarcerated individual that was problematic. So we are really hoping that these, and just looking at some of the research that's been done at other detention centers and prisons around the country, and the significance that this little object has made, we're really hoping that's going to help us protect our staff a lot more.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me.
No worries. I have one last question for you, and this is on the challenges that our transgender inmates are facing. So obviously there's some mixed guidance we're getting from the federal government, but I, for one, in addition to thinking, of course, as we all do, that everyone should feel safe when in the care of the state, I also believe that we put ourselves at risk of significant litigation if, we're not equitably, ensuring their safety. Can you just elaborate a little bit more as to the training and everything that we're doing to not, help keep them safe, but also not involuntarily just place them in solitary confinement as a default, right? Or restrictive housing, let me say.
So we have approximately 115 individuals that have identified as transgender in our population. And based on the new PREA guidelines, we are actually going through our case managers and meeting with each and every one of them to determine what their needs are, how safe do they feel where they're placed, are there recommendations that they have for safety, and can we comply with those recommendations based on the housing opportunities we have. I think, as you also heard, we've done some implicit bias training. We started actually at the executive level, at my level with my executive team. We've had moved it down to our wardens and our supervisors, and it's also being implemented within our annual in-service training, as well as teaching them confrontational avoidance when it comes to just any type of individual. So we are diligently working to ensure that we meet the needs of that population. We have done some work with TREC on reviewing some of our policies and asking them to assist with guidelines, and we'll continue to work with our community partners as well to ensure that that population is served appropriately.
Thank you, colleagues. Any further questions for the Secretary? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
We do have a few witnesses that we will transition to. I think we will do the ones who are in person first. I know we do have a couple that are virtual, but we'll start with the ones in person first. And you can approach, I see Tony Sins, hopefully I said that right. Signs, sorry. Tony Signs, Ryan Morris, Denise Gilmore, and Musab Ibrahim as well. You all can approach and begin when you're ready. It's good to see you all. Thanks for taking on the cold and the snow to be here.
Okay. Great. Good afternoon. My name is Denise Gilmore. I'm the Legislative and Political Director with AFSCME Maryland, Council 3. Thanks for the opportunity to testify. If there is a certain area of the state when they are short-staffed that I think keeps us as union representatives up at night, it is our 24/7 facilities. We are very, very disheartened to see that this budget proposes a reduction of 107 correctional officers. It wasn't that long ago, about 2 to 3 years ago, that both management and the union did analysis of how many correctional officers we needed. I think management's analysis came back at 2,500, ours came back at 3,400. The point is, both management and the union stipulated that thousands of correctional officers were needed to properly staff our prisons. And to sit here 2 years later with a reduction in correctional officers when we are averaging 9 assaults a day on our members in corrections is an insult, and it's dangerous. And when we short staff our facilities, people die. People get seriously injured. This is completely unacceptable. Since 2020, we've been averaging about $150 million a year in overtime expenses in the Department of Corrections. That alone is enough to fund hundreds, if not thousands, of additional correctional officers if we wanted to. Instead, we are wearing these guys out, and that is not a way to staff these facilities. I'm going to hand it over to the experts, but we implore you to please seek alternatives to these cuts in our public safety agencies. We simply cannot afford them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Signs, and I'm the proud president of AFSCME Local 898, representing corrections in Western Maryland. Over the last year, the number of staff assaults in my facilities have more than doubled. These staff assaults have become more frequent and violent in nature. One officer had his throat cut. Multiple other officers were stabbed in the upper body and neck area last year. These violent assaults have caused several officers to be life-flighted to Morgantown and Pittsburgh for treatment. It's nothing short of a miracle that none of these officers lost their lives. Lack of direct supervision over incarcerated individuals has led to a spike in inmate-on-inmate assaults and murders too. More staffing leads to safer facilities for all. We must act now and do something to address this short staffing crisis. With the short staffing issue, we are unable to run programs, shops for incarcerated individuals we house. At times, we are lucky to have enough staff to make sure they have 1 hour out of cell activity in a day's time, just further causing more tension. While AFSCME and DPSCS have been working together to do what we can to maximize safety, there is only so much that can be done without enough staffing. We are losing recruits to neighboring jurisdictions who offer better pay and benefits. And we are losing new hires and experienced staff because of the strain of all the overtime has on people's personal lives. We ask to please fully fund us and pursue alternatives to these cuts, which we simply cannot afford before someone loses their lives. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Oluwadamilola Olaniyan, a correctional sergeant and the proud president of AFSCME Local 1678, representing over 1,500 correctional employees in JSOP and other members under Council 3. In June 2024, we met with the department to bargain a staffing analysis plan. We both agreed to staffing posts that need to be added to maintain safety and security in our institutions. However, since then, more staffing positions and posts have been cut. This trend of disinvestment in our prison system is causing more harm than good. When we don't invest in enough staff, over time costs increase, more staff are hurt and get placed out of work. And incarcerated individuals leave our prisons without the support they need to be successful back in our communities. Whenever the legislature creates new programs for incarcerated individuals, they are staffed with employees working mandatory overtime, which causes a huge strain. This costs taxpayers more money. Example is the methadone and Suboxone program. This costs more staff and more working hours for our members. Workers and incarcerated individuals also deserve to have modern facilities that meet the needs of today. In my prison, broken cell doors exist, which provide opportunity for inmate-on-inmate assaults. We've had to add staff to position themselves where doors don't work. And it seems been like this since 2022, and we're still looking forward to having these doors fixed. We also have eating problems and lack of air conditioning in our institutions. The incarcerated population suffers the most because when it's cold or hot, it is to the extreme in their cells. There are little the maintenance staff can do. They come around, they short staff as well. They need more staff to be able to come in frequently to do all this fixing. Our infrastructures are dilapidating and falling apart, and I urge us to do something by planning for the future that includes investment in pre-releases facilities like the women's prison. These facilities are vital for helping the incarcerated transition into the community. It's time to invest in a modern, well-staffed prison system. Too many lives are at stake, and I'm asking and pleading that you fund the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Thank you.
Hello. All right. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Musab Ibrahim, and I am the Senior Research Assistant at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. I'm also here today as a member of the Women's Pre-Release Equity Coalition, and I'd like to discuss reentry services in the Division of Corrections fiscal 26 operating budget. As you know, reentry services are critical to support Marylanders who are returning to the community following a period of incarceration. They provide returning citizens with an opportunity to begin reintegration into the communities with critical services in place to ease the transition. For many incarcerated women in Maryland, these services often feel unavailable. As was mentioned earlier by the DLS analyst, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Project Fresh has a low participation rate, and it is the amount of reentry specialists working there currently, we believe is considerably inadequate. Let's see. Pre-release services should be funded adequately to support full participation and successful reentry. I wanted to highlight two things from the budget that I thought that I wanted to highlight is the uses of inmate welfare funds and work release funds. Inmate welfare funds are fees generated from commissary and vending machine sales, which are then used for inmate welfare activities. So part of this could also be pre-release. Additionally, for work release, and for this year, and for this amount for fiscal 26 was $85,000. We believe these funds should be enhanced to support adequate pre-release services without additional fees charged to incarcerated individuals. For work release fees, which are charged to incarcerated individuals for work release, these can be up to $6.50 for daily round trips and $135 for full-time employee room and board. This cost can certainly impact the incarcerated population given the very low wages that that they are able to receive. Lastly, information on pre-release programming for women is particularly limited, and we believe that the department should implement a policy of disaggregating data on pre-release and related statuses to target funds at addressing the shortfalls in the services. For these reasons, MedSep respectfully requests that the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee amend the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services operating budget to address the above recommendations. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, any question for the panelists? All right, seeing none, thank you. I believe we have one more person in person, and then we would transition to the virtual. Matan Zamir, hopefully I said it correctly, with Jews United for Justice. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
You can
Good
begin when you're ready.
Chair.
2 minutes.
Members of the committee, my name is, for the record, my name is Matan Zemer. I'm the Maryland Policy Director at Jews United for Justice, but honored today to be here today on behalf of the Women's Pre-Release Equity Coalition. We have several members who are tuned in online and paying attention, just couldn't be here today in person. I wanted to first start by thanking the committee for your continued oversight on the issue of women's pre-release. Obviously, it's been many years of this, and we appreciate the continued efforts on that. Unfortunately, we're here before you again because 4 years after the veto override, DPSCS has made little progress toward constructing and operating the women's pre-release facility, which was required to have been completed over 1 year ago. And women incarcerated at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women, MCIW, are still not receiving meaningful pre-release services, as you've heard today. And you know, the FY26 budget provides every indication that it continues to provide this unequal treatment for women so long as the women remain at MCIW. Because it's come up here today, I just want to highlight one piece of our collective written testimony, which is around employment programming at MCE. According to the Secretary's report in 2024 to the Joint Budget Chairman's report, there was no indication that any women were engaged in employment outside of MCE, and all experts agree that the #1 determinant of recidivism is whether the returning individual has full-time employment upon release. The Brookings Institution study found that institutional employment does not contribute to a lowering of recidivism rate, and MC employment is what's considered institutional employment. So that is all women are getting now, therefore, that's all that women are getting as of now, and we expect recidivism rates at 41% and attendant costs to remain the same despite annual expenditures of over $48,000 per capita. And so recidivism rates could drop to between 9% and 16% if a returning individual has a job upon release, which is just one of the benefits of adequate pre-release services. As we all know, if the facility was operating now, operating costs would be significantly reduced, and the cost of recidivism would also be vastly reduced. So this is not just a moral obligation. It's a statutory obligation and an obligation demanded by the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution and the Maryland Equal Rights Amendment. It was pretty shocking to hear today, and I saw some reaction as well, that there are only 2 staff members who are providing services to the individuals on pre-release status, and they're not even solely dedicated to those individuals. I also just want to highlight, because this has come up in some conversations, the Baltimore Therapeutic Treatment Center, which is a proposed facility in Baltimore City, which is now the cost of that construction has ballooned. I know that's capital budget, but has ballooned to over $1 billion. There have been proposals that women's pre-release somehow gets folded into that, which we find to be wildly inadequate and would kind of go against the whole purpose of what the original legislative intent and what we know best practices are. And so this is also, you know, a Hogan-era policy that we haven't seen really revisited as why are we proposing $1 billion facility? Why are we looking at our existing infrastructure and supporting places that we know will actually provide treatment and care that individuals need? So I just wanted to note that. Happy to have more further conversation on that. Obviously, we look forward to continuing our work with you on oversight here. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and for your advocacy. And for the folks online, thank you all for tuning. Obviously, the weather,
Yes.
we understand. Colleagues, any questions? See none, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So we do have 3 virtual witnesses. Is it just 2 now? Okay.
I'm actually here. I made it in person.
Oh, really? All right, wonderful. Heather?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. You can testify, and then we'll go virtually to, I believe, Ms. Chaudhry, and then Jamie Grace Alexander after that. You can begin with.
Yeah. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Heather Warnken from the Center for Criminal Justice Reform at the University of Baltimore School of Law. Prior to my current role, I served at the U.S. Department of Justice, where I worked on numerous initiatives focused on addressing the needs of incarcerated individuals, and in particular, those most vulnerable to victimization behind the walls of the nation's prisons and jails. That included serving on DOJ's Prison Rape Elimination Act working group. More recently, our center has been honored to partner with the Trans Rights Advocacy Coalition, working to protect the rights of incarcerated trans people in this state. So trans and non-binary people are incredibly vulnerable nearly everywhere, and this is especially pronounced in confinement settings. They are nearly 10 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than other incarcerated individuals, to be illegally placed in solitary confinement, including for their own, quote, protection, along with a host of other heightened risk factors, as detailed in our written testimony to this committee last year. So to start, we want to thank the committee for your invaluable oversight role, which has been instrumental in getting DPSCS to the table for urgently needed policy reforms to address these pervasive realities here in Maryland. You may recall, in response to the report DPSCS submitted addressing the treatment of trans incarcerated individuals required under the budget language, TRAC testified last year to the findings of our detailed analysis of that report, documenting numerous alarming admissions and omissions, including violations under federal and constitutional law, including PREA. So we're very grateful to the Secretary and DPSCS for the good faith efforts made since, including approximately 10 meetings over the course of the year to address policies that are out of compliance with legal and medical standards. However, we return to express our deep concern at how slow and insufficient this has been. You will hear from my colleague, Jamie Grace Alexander, a little bit more about those specifics. And as noted by Ms. Barber, the report due in response to last year's budget language is now months late. So we look forward to continuing to work with DPSCS to make needed progress, and with this committee in your critical oversight role. Given the proliferation of attacks on the rights and humanity of trans people, it is more important than ever that we work together to protect those who are most vulnerable in the state's custody and care. I'd like to clarify to the conversation earlier about the impact of the EOs. It is still PREA, and its implementing regulations are still the law of the land. Those have not changed that. That will be fought tooth and nail. But to the extent that erosions to PREA's implementing regulations come down the pike as a result of those EOs, it is more important than ever than we stand on Maryland's values and anti-discrimination law to not allow the absolutely horrific human rights violations that are taking place right now as a result of that EO for trans and non-binary individuals in the federal system. Thanks for your time.
Heather, good to see you again, and thank you for your advocacy and for making the trip out here. I also appreciate the clarification on the record for all those who are tuning in. Any questions? Delegate McComas.
Yes, I'm going to rely on your expertise here. How many folks do we have in the system, if you know, the system of Maryland, that are non-binary or trans, that you know, and I guess, are the women more likely to, well, what I want to say is the females, okay, whichever they are, or the males, if they're in the male system, which is more likely to be harassed, or both are likely to be victimized?
All trans and non-binary incarcerated people experience an exponentially higher rate of risk of victimization. As I noted, 10 times the general population, and that in the past year, 40% of trans incarcerated people in the state and federal system across the country had reported some form of sexual violence. So it's really widespread across those gender identities.
So the question is, what can we do to not put them on an island in the Antarctic or anything, but to protect them, but yet they're still, they don't feel like they're isolated from everybody. So, I mean, would that be the best thing, that they have their own little cell block or something, or?
Part of what PREA requires is that there is an individualized assessment that takes into account a number of specific factors, including that individual's own perception of their safety. The Secretary alluded to the work and the progress I think the department is very much working on in good faith to go from what was stated in their report last year, which is that the policy is to house based solely on genitalia, which is a violation of PREA and will not accomplish the aims that you're talking about, toward that more individualized assessment. I was encouraged to hear the Secretary's comments about meeting with those that they have identified to sort of backfill, some of that work. But it's all the more reason why I think we're hoping for an acceleration of this process at the table with TRAC, because I think we still have quite a long way to go to document, make those policies official, make them consistent, train the correctional workforce on them, and then have those who have those rights understand that. And I think there's been some really impactful litigation and some progress made in some other states like Colorado that as a result of lawsuits have experimented with specialized units. But it's not a one-size-fits-all, because the problem, of course, with specialized units is that you might be infringing someone's rights by not taking those other individual assessments into account.
So basically, can you give me an idea of how many individuals that we have in the Maryland system?
Yeah, I believe the Secretary quoted it, yeah.
I'm sorry.
115.
Oh, 110.
I want to just add a quick asterisk to that number. Because we have such significant safety issues for trans individuals, and because there are so many culture and climate challenges and discrimination that people faced in the individual facility level, which is not consistent across the state, there are also reasons why someone might not disclose or go to great lengths to try to hide that or do certain things for survival, even if it meant causing significant psychological distress. So I just want to say it's important that we look at those statistics, eyes wide open, about a much deeper layer of issues that surround them.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to transition to the virtual witnesses now. Thank you so much, Heather. Yeah. First, we'll have Ms. Chaudhry, Zainab Chaudhry of CARE, and then we'll go over to Jamie Grace Alexander. Are they still on? Okay. Can you turn on your camera?
Hello, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
We are.
Okay, wonderful. I am trying to close out the background audio, the YouTube. So just 1 second.
Well, fortunately, we can't hear it.
Okay, so I have an echo in my background. I'm going to try to reconnect and see if you're able to hear me okay, because I'm having some audio issues.
Okay, no worries. I think we're going to transition to Jamie Grace Alexander, and then we'll come back to you. Jamie, are you on? Okay. Zippity-doo-dah. Jamie, can you turn on your video, please?
Sure.
Wonderful. Welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. You can begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jamie Grace Alexander. I work as a paralegal at Baltimore Action Legal Team, focused on helping Black people in Baltimore expunge their criminal records. I'm a passionate advocate of criminal justice reform, and I was led to this work through listening to the experiences of my community. Members of my community face staggering statistics of violence while incarcerated. As a baseline policy, transgender people are held separately from the general population, which leads to over 80% of people experiencing protective solitary confinement. Multiple examples of litigation have cost the department thousands of dollars over their mistreatment of trans women. I'm also a leader in the Trans Rights Advocacy Coalition. In the past, we've brought forward legislation sponsored by Delegate Kelly and Senator Carter, both of whom have moved on. This bill, the Respect Agency and Dignity Act, we saw as the only way to change the way transgender people are held in confinement. After pursuing this legislation for several years, we sought the help of this committee to collect more data through budget language. In response, DPSCS issued a report entitled Treatment of Transgender Incarcerated Individuals. This report gave us some information we were looking for, like a rough estimate on the amount of transgender people currently in DPSCS custody, but failed in other critical areas. However, this report started a dialogue between us and DPSCS, and for this I wanted to express our extreme gratitude to the Joint Chairman's reports issued in 2023 and 2024. Last year we had 10 meetings with the department, and that has been tremendous progress from where we started, but it's moving slowly. We've only had the opportunity to provide feedback on one policy so far, and this is out of the 29 that they have stated are related to the treatment of transgender people. We appreciate the ability to work directly with them, but these issues need urgent attention in order to protect trans people and the state from further lawsuits. We're disappointed and concerned the department has not issued the report that this committee requested that was due in October. While working with track on these policies is important, it's not a replacement for the necessary and important data required by the JCR. And given the concerns of the first report in 2023, receiving no response this year is just unacceptable. So in conclusion, I want to urge this body to reissue budget language that holds DPSCS accountable to describing the treatment of members of my transgender community, because the problem only grows in darkness. We look forward to continuing to work with the department and welcome the continued oversight and respectfully request reissuance of previous reporting requirements from this committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you for your advocacy and for showing up this afternoon. All right, we're going to transition to our last witness. Ms. Chaudhry, you can begin when you're ready. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you, Chair Lewis, members of the committee, subcommittee. On behalf of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, I thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today. My organization is America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. We are dedicated to protecting the rights of Muslim Americans and promoting justice for all Marylanders. We urge the subcommittee to allocate resources to the Department of Corrections to support comprehensive training for correctional staff on religious accommodations for inmates. The ability of incarcerated individuals to freely practice their faith is a fundamental constitutional right under the First Amendment and is further protected by the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, or RLUIPA. However, reports from community members and legal advocates indicate ongoing challenges in Maryland correctional institutions regarding religious accommodations. Our office has received numerous complaints from Muslim inmates detailing denials of religious dietary accommodations, limited access to prayer services, and restrictions on religious attire, including kufis and hijabs, or the Islamic headscarves, for female inmates. Additionally, there are concerns regarding inadequate space and time for religious observances, particularly during the holy month of Ramadan, which will now be beginning in a couple weeks, and where inmates across the state will also be observing with Muslims around the world during this holy month. These issues not only violate federal protections, but also undermine undermine the rehabilitation and dignity of incarcerated individuals. Providing correctional officers and staff with structured, evidence-based training on religious accommodations will help to ensure compliance with federal and state laws and foster a more inclusive and constitutionally sound correctional system. Such training should cover key topics including the legal framework governing religious rights for inmates under RLUIPA and the First Amendment, best practices for accommodating religious dietary needs, including access to halal and kosher meals, guidance on religious clothing, grooming, and prayer accommodations, and sensitivity training on religious diversity to prevent discrimination and harassment. By investing in these trainings, Maryland can take a proactive approach to upholding the religious rights of all incarcerated individuals, reducing potential litigation risks, and fostering an environment that respects religious diversity. So that, therefore, we respectfully urge the subcommittee to ensure that the Department of Corrections receives the necessary resources to implement a robust training program for correctional staff around the state. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony and for staying the course here, as this has been going on for a little bit. Colleagues, any question for Kier? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. With that, I think that is everyone who we had signed up to testify. Thank you all for coming. We are adjourned. Have a great day.